Hey everyone, welcome to the College Football Rundown. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
You can check us out at our website, www.collegefootballrundown.com. You can grab us on Twitter at WWCFB. It's Woj and Walt, College Football. Big week last week, Kyle. Huge week. Upset week. I know we've already had an upset week this year, but we can't go without saying this week, or last week was an upset week. First time ever that 5 of the top 8 in the AP went down.
Upset City. That's what I'm calling it. You know, we called Upset Week already. We can call it Upset Week Round 2, I guess, but I'm going to call it Upset City because it was ridiculous the amount of upsets there were last week.
Yeah, just for an idea, if you were a betting man and you just decided you wanted to parlay all those together, say you put down $100, you would have been $56,000 richer by the end of Saturday night.
Really? Is that what it came out to?
That's what it came out to. $56,000 richer on a $100 bet parlaying all 5 of those games.
I believe it.
It'd be pretty hard to bet that. I don't know if anybody.
No one's gonna bet that. It's an impossible bet to win, actually.
But lots of big games. It all started Thursday night with Arizona at Oregon. That was a huge game for Oregon to win. It was at home, and they just lost it. What's plagued them all year, I think, has ended up eventually what lost them the game. It was that offensive line of theirs that just can't keep Mariota safe. He's had to scramble a lot, which he's good on the scramble. I think he's a better quarterback while scrambling.
I don't know that he's a better quarterback. He's one of the better quarterbacks when he's scrambling. Yeah, I agree with that.
But, I mean, Oregon having their offensive line hurt, 3 starters down the last 2 games against Arizona in the game before that. They've had a freshman in and a walk-on starter. So they've struggled in the offensive line. They're young, they're learning, and it definitely what ended up killing them. As far as the game went, Arizona and Oregon were back and forth. It was actually a fairly low-scoring game for what I thought would be a lot higher. The end score was 31-24. But with 2 high-powered quarterbacks in that game, you thought it'd be a little bit higher. But Arizona's defense actually did pretty well that entire game. It came down to a kind of a final drive by Arizona that had a couple controversial plays in it, you could say. There was a unsportsmanlike conduct call on Tony Washington from Oregon on a sack, it was a 3rd and 8, and they sacked him, which would have put him back probably about 4th and 15. And Solman got up, and then Tony Washington got up, ran in the middle of the field, and bowed. They instantly called that. And, you know, a lot of people said, well, why would you call that? Why would you call that? The thing about it is they called a similar play on Arizona earlier in the game. So they were calling it. It wasn't like they just weren't calling it and they called that. They were calling it. So, I mean, that's just something you can't do. That's a no-no in college football, especially late in a game like that.
Late in the game, they're going to call it, even though you hate to see it because it really affects the game, especially late. But, again, if they'd set that precedent early in the game, you can't do something like that. Now, if they hadn't set that precedent and this guy came out, took a bow, and there was no precedent set. Somebody done it maybe 5 or 6 times. They didn't call it once. They call it once at the end of the game. Now you got a problem. You got a problem with those officials, and you're gonna be hearing about it all week. But no, there's nothing wrong as long as they've set that precedent, as I said.
That same drive turned into a pass interference call in the end zone. Caleb Jones went up for a ball in the corner of the end zone. The guy was mauling him. That was a no-brainer call there. Put him closer down to the end zone. They got to the 1, and then Grigsby ran it in for a touchdown, put him in the lead 31-24. Oregon got the ball back a couple plays into that drive. Scooby Wright from Arizona sacked him and stripped the ball. Got the ball back, ran the timeout. So it was a clean strip, obviously a fumble. But what a blow to Oregon.
That's a huge blow to Oregon, and I would have never expected it. One, for the reason last year Arizona beat Oregon last year also 42-16. You'd think that Oregon's coming back this year on a mission, ready to kill Arizona.
Yeah, the pollers thought the professional line guy thought the same thing. I think it was 24.5 was the spread going into the game.
Yeah, the handicappers I'm sure were surprised themselves.
Yeah.
But you just would never expect that. But then if you look at the stats, you get deep down into it. They had some hurt linemen, like you said, in Oregon on offense. Also, Oregon's defense is horrible. They're atrocious. They've given up 1,548 passing yards on the season. That puts them 119, obviously, out of 125 teams. That's not good. Now, when you got
it's not good, but they did have to play Washington State.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. Washington State, Connor Holiday is going to put up a lot of yards against you all the time. But still, you had more than, now that we're in week 7, you've had more than one game. It averages out. A top 5 ranked team, you're ranked 119th in passing yards on defense. That makes no sense to me. And this is the problem. Pollsters don't realize this, but this will always, until we're dead, until the day we die, I don't know, I can't speak for after that, but offense will win games and defense will win championships.
I would agree. You have to have a good defense in order to win. And I'll talk about that more later, too. It's a good thing you brought that up. But, yeah, I think that defense was going to catch up to Oregon at some point. I'm surprised it was this game that did it.
Oh, yeah. It is surprising.
But, hey, props to Arizona. They've done a good job back-to-back years now beating Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
This one at Oregon, which was a feisty crowd on top of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it hurts Oregon. I don't think they have a shot now at the top 4. Even if they were to go undefeated the rest of the way, the SEC is just too highly, is just too good as far as strength of schedule goes for, I think, the playoff committee to put them back in.
Yeah, the Ducks are out.
Yeah. Another great game that happened, Alabama versus Ole Miss. Again, Ole Miss took down Alabama. It was 23-17, Ole Miss. This one surprised me more than any of the ones. Even maybe the Utah-UCLA game was a little bit surprising, but this one was crazy. I thought Alabama could at least control a game well enough to beat Ole Miss, but man, Bo Wallace put up some numbers in that game. Just for an idea, Ole Miss outscored Alabama 20-3 in the second half. Bo Wallace scored 2 touchdowns in the last 10 minutes of the game to put him get 2 decent drives down the field to put them in the lead. So props to Ole Miss on those drives. So
yeah, Ole Miss is a damn good team, and you can kind of see it in the fact that I hate to harp on the loser in this, but you can see how good a team Ole Miss is by the fact that Bama only dropped from 3 to 7. Yeah. I mean, when you lose to a team like that and you're ranked 3 in the nation and you lose to, let's say, an Ole Miss team, normally you drop down out of the top 10, but no, that's how much respect Ole Miss is getting. That's how good a team they are. The AP poll only dropped them down to 7 from 3. That's really only 4 spots.
I don't disagree. I think any SEC team right now, if you lose to an SEC team, sorry, well, here's a couple spots knocked down. They're so good, top to bottom in the SEC. I actually had a conversation with my dad the other day. My dad was a longtime sports writer for a Chicago newspaper. He's since moved on, but I talked to him about Auburn. You think of Auburn as like a middle-of-the-pack guy in the West, in the SEC. Look at a middle-of-the-pack guy in the Big Ten. I'm thinking Iowa.
I'd say they're a middle of the pack right now.
And I just pick Iowa, too, because I've watched more of their games than any other Big Ten team by far. So I can kind of compare. Now, I've watched Auburn the last couple weeks, and when I put those two together, I see a definite winner by a mile. It's just there's no competition in those teams. It's so fun right now watching the SEC. There's such competitors. There's so many good quarterbacks, so many good players. It's just they're in a league of their own this year. I know we've said that people have always said the SEC is always better than everybody else. This year, that is definitely true.
Yeah, I think it's true to an extent, because we'll get in a little bit later when we talk about our power shift, but I think that some of the teams that we just, on the top of our head, for example, LSU, we just think, they're in the SEC, they're good. But this year, they're really not good. They're actually kind of garbage. Now, you put LSU against one of those Big Ten schools, I think the Big Ten might beat them. That's how bad they are.
I mean, yeah, on any given Saturday, too. I mean, anybody can beat anybody. That's the beauty of college football. But, I mean, just top to bottom, LSU, which I would consider a bottom feeder in that West Division now, could probably beat one of the better teams in the Big. I mean, they can at least compete. So, they definitely have some issues at the quarterback position over there as well. But back to the Alabama-Ole Miss game. Ole Miss trailed 17-10 going into the fourth quarter. They had a big drive followed up by a forced fumble on a kickoff, which turned into another TD, and then Blake Sims got the ball back at the end of the game trying to drive down the field, and Ole Miss intercepted it. Another turnover for Alabama, which has plagued them most of the year. And we talked about that, 9 turnovers on the year now. So Utah, UCLA, another big game. UCLA lost 30-28. Utah was the unranked team in this, and UCLA was ranked 8th. Most people thought they would be the top contender. And we saw a game last week where UCLA, where Hundley came in and destroyed. He did so well. He was breaking tackles. He was running the ball well. He was throwing the ball well. And this week he came in and he looked like a different player. He was, when he did get time in the pocket, he would find pressure and he would try to move himself out. And he was holding on to the ball too long. He wasn't running it very well. It just looked like a completely different player this week. And the thing about it was there was a lot of pressure early by Utah. I think he was sacked 4 times in the game all together. One of the Utah players set a school record for sacks in a single game, or tied it. But he just looked like a completely different player than what we saw last week.
Well, last week he surprised us. So we got our hopes up a little bit. We expected more out of him maybe this week than we normally would have, and he didn't perform.
Yeah, and when you look at the stats, when you're looking at Utah, Kevin Thompson, their quarterback, he only had 95 yards passing. That's not. He had 83 on the ground, so he killed them both in the air and on the ground. It was a multi-threat there. They ran the option a couple times. We talked about that when they were playing. It was nice to kind of see that kind of game again. That you probably haven't seen much of since back when West Virginia truly ran it 100% of the time.
Those are fun times to watch.
Yeah, so. Props to Utah. They played a really good game. UCLA, I think, on the other hand, played a really bad game, especially in the offensive line. On the offense, I think Hundley might have lost them that game. It was a bad effort offensively all around for UCLA. So, I mean, again, props to Utah. They did a really good job. But I think that was UCLA losing the game instead of Utah winning the game, in my opinion.
You're probably right, although I hate this about college football, but I do think it's true. Like you just said, Hundley lost him a game. One player can't lose you a game unless you're a quarterback. And that's why there's so much pressure on a quarterback to perform well. So
yeah, no, I agree. Some of the other noteworthies as far as who lost last week, Arizona State beat USC. USC is, ever since we talked about how good they've been and turned around, they've now gone out and lost 3 games. So they will not be in the top 25 next week. I'm almost guaranteed of that. Northwestern beat Wisconsin. That was a Big Ten mix-up there. Yeah. Northwestern doing that sneaky stuff they do every year where they always beat a bigger team in the Big Ten right about mid-season. So that's not uncommon for Northwestern.
No, and it makes us mad a lot of times, too.
Yeah, usually it's against Iowa. Their record against Iowa is just, it's unbelievable. They're like 6-2 in the last 8 years. So TCU beating Oklahoma. That was a big thing in the Big 12 there. Now, I mean, you have TCU and Baylor now playing this coming week, which is going to be probably a big game for the Big 12, especially with UCLA dropping off last week to Utah. So Mississippi State beat Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I called that big of an upset, but it was an upset as far as the rankings go. Texas A&M did not play very well that game, and Dak Prescott did what Dak Prescott does, and that's why he's the Heisman frontrunner. Fantasy. Well, you know what? I want to talk about something else too. That was the first time. I know we talked about it was the first time in five of the top 8 lost, but 4 of the top 6 lost. One other time in college football, and that was in the AP poll era, which I think it was 1938 that the AP poll era was introduced. But one other time this happened, it was in 1990 in Week 11. Virginia, Nebraska, Auburn, Illinois got kicked out. Those were the teams. That was the year that basically everybody complained about the current program, which is basically how they decided their national championship. Is they took the polls from the AP and the coaches poll, and they combined them, and that's how they got their national championship. Well, that year there was a split decision. Colorado and Georgia Tech both were national championships. There was no national championship game back then. There was no BCS yet. So it couldn't be determined in the game. But that's why there was so much controversy that people wanted to see a BCS system. That's kind of where it sparked. It's kind of where it started the whole process. But another big thing about that year is Colorado, who won the split decision there. That was the year they had the fifth down game. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember fifth down.
Where it was Bellini.
Yeah.
So basically, Colorado's playing Missouri. This is the middle of the season. Colorado's playing Missouri. Get down to the goal line. They're on the 1, okay? The 1. They have 4 downs. Well, 5 downs, really, to get into the end zone here. They get down there. They spike the ball. There's, I think, 15 seconds left in the clock. They run it. They get stuffed. They run it. They get stuffed. But they called a timeout right after they ran it the second time. The guys that were handling the what do you call the line
Markers?
judge, were the markers, didn't change the down. So when the quarterback came back on the field, he wasn't thinking of anything. They called the timeout for second down. They ran it for 1 yard, got stuffed. Then he came back on the field. They ran it again, and thinking that it was third down or going to be fourth down coming up, he spiked the ball, but it was really, that would have been fourth down, but they didn't realize it because the marker said third. So the refs actually had to give them an extra play, so they got an extra play out of it, and they scored a touchdown the next one, which ended up in them winning a national championship into the end of the year. So just a kind of a fun little fact there.
That is crazy.
Yeah. But let's get into what's the power shift here. So we've had all these games, all these mix-ups in the rankings here. What are we looking at for this coming week?
Well, we've seen a huge power shift, and it's not necessarily just coming off of last weekend's upset city, as we've dubbed it. It's coming off the whole season as a whole. You may be wondering, well, what do you mean a power shift? Well, you're not going to believe me when I tell you this, but these are the games that are playing this weekend. Texas versus Oklahoma. That game is this weekend. Who's talking about that game? No one. No one's talking about that game. Penn State versus Michigan. That game is playing this weekend. Who's talking about that one? No one. LSU at Florida. LSU going into the swamp to play Florida. And no one's talking about that game. We're talking about Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Again, they've been powerhouses at one point, but they're not the consistent perennial powerhouses. Who are we looking at this weekend? Besides them, Auburn, Mississippi State. Like I said, Mississippi State we are looking at.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's, I think, the marquee game this weekend. It's ESPN's marquee game. But I think you look at the Big 12 matchup, the TCU Baylor.
That's a game we wouldn't be looking at 3 years
No.
ago, 4 years ago. It's incredible. Georgia versus Missouri.
Yeah.
Who cares about that game? But it's huge this time. And that power shift is crazy. USC versus Arizona. That game is a pick'em.
Yeah.
Now, how many times in our lifetime have you seen USC playing Arizona and the game's a pick'em game? Normally they're given at least 2 touchdowns, at least. But no, this is an even game in which, if you guys don't know, for gamblers, pick'em means that it's an even game. They expect that the score is going to be tied. No one gets any more points than the other one. So that's what pick'em means. But this is crazy, Woj. And I think, this is my opinion, I think that the big Power 5 conferences saw this coming. You know why I think that?
Why?
Because of the new Power 5 vote. They saw that these conferences, these other teams, are going to start creeping up on the Power 5. They need to separate themselves again. And this kind of just came to light this week with me. I didn't think about this before, but a lot of these lesser conferences, lesser teams we don't hear about, they're getting pretty even with those Power 5 conferences. Now that we have this Power 5 vote, that's obviously going to change it. And I think that those Power 5 conferences, they saw this coming, and that's why they pushed so hard for this Power 5 vote.
Yeah, possible. That's could be. I like the power shift kind of. I enjoy watching some of these other schools play. And the thing about it is, like we talked about earlier, I think all of the power is in the SEC's hands right now. I know we're looking at some of those Big 12 games and things like that, but I think we'll have a better shape of things after this week as far as the polls go. And we'll see where we go from there. But I think after this coming week, when we see the victor of Auburn versus Mississippi State, the TCU Baylor, we're really going to get an idea of where we are as far as the top 5, top 4, maybe top 6, so we can kind of start narrowing it down.
3 of those, I can guarantee this, 3 of those top 6 teams you would have never expected to be in the top 10, rather on the top 6 when the polls come out next week. Yeah. I guarantee that.
So fantasy football for this week, I know we've talked about Connor Holiday a lot, almost the entire year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it's because Washington State passes a lot. I mean, he's a quarterback from Washington State, and just to kind of get an idea, most games you're going to see, passes completed. 50 would be quite a bit in my book, at least. I think, wouldn't you think?
50 it's a high number, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Connor Holiday completed 49 of 70 passes.
Well,
49 of 70.
Well, that's the coach right there, and we knew it was going to happen. Mike Leach moved over there from, Texas Tech. He brought that air raid offense with him, and I say one of these weeks we help the audience figure out what an air raid offense is. But in general, like you said, it means you're going to pass the ball, and when you pass the ball, you get 70 attempts.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns in those 70 attempts, no interceptions, which is remarkable, and an FBS record, 734 yards. in the air for Washington State.
And I was celebrating every one of those yards.
It was a loss, by the way.
That's irrelevant for me.
60-59. So it wasn't without a lot of scoring in that game. That is an unbelievable score. I kind of wanted. I don't even know what the over/under in that game was, but I can guarantee you it was probably over. So
yeah, I didn't check it before the game started, so I don't recall.
We talked about this guy last couple times this year. Last week we talked about and told everybody to pick him up if you could. He'd be an available running back. Put up some, maybe not crazy stats, but put up some stats for you. Matt Jones from Florida. He did end up doing pretty well last week. Rushed 23 times for 114 yards and a touchdown against Tennessee. He was the 16th best running back in points last week in our league, at least with 18. He is probably still available in your league. They're playing LSU this week, so they're going to have a little bit of struggle. LSU's run defense is actually fairly good, but he's still out there. He's getting reps. They're going to probably go to the run game a little bit more now with this Florida controversy possibly, but we'll see what they do. But just a good guy to have in your team, maybe pick up. Another guy would be Jeff Driscoll, which is the Florida quarterback. He'd be kind of a pickup for this coming week. There's some controversy we'll go over with Florida in a little bit, but just kind of a guy that you might want to put in your team if you need a quarterback and need to fill that slot. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think their quarterbacks are putting up all that good of numbers, but if it's a last-ditch effort and there's no one else available, he's there to pick up.
Yeah, definitely. That's a guy you might pick up just for that bye week. You have your two quarterbacks on a bye. You can just pick them up for the week. You're not going to get many out of them, but he's going to help your team.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know what we need to concentrate on is who we're not going to play this week. Todd Gurley.
Oh, Todd Gurley.
Make sure you take Todd Gurley off your team.
Yeah, just got suspended by the NCAA indefinitely for an alleged violation of rules. What that means, we're still unclear of. One of the ESPN insiders, Joe Shedd, said that usually from the way the NCAA worded the document, it's more or less an issue of receiving benefits. Anything from signing selling autographs, he said any kind of benefit, but the wording is as where it would normally be a benefits violation of the rules. They're investigating it, but he is now indefinitely suspended. What does that do to Georgia?
Oh, I don't know. And again, I hate hearing this garbage because this is America. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. We haven't heard anything about it. I think we don't discuss it until we know all the facts. We know exactly what happened and we know exactly how it's going to affect their team. Then obviously going forward. But as far as this week, if he actually doesn't play, which it sounds like he's not going to, it's going to hurt their team. There's no question about it. So.
I just don't see Hunter Mason being able to lead that team on his back. I've mentioned that before. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. That's Georgia's quarterback. With Todd Gurley out, Nick Chubb is probably going to get a lot more carries. He's their number one backup. Again, they do have 4 running backs, but he's the guy that's primarily getting the carries behind Gurley. So he's probably going to get a lot more carries. He's pretty good. He's a freshman. So we'll see how he does. We'll see how that game goes. Again, Georgia's playing Missouri. That's going to be probably a big game this week. It's 11 Central Time on CBS. We just talked about the Todd Gurley suspended. We're going to keep going that way with Florida's issues on and off on the field, they've been terrible. Off the field, they've been even worse. Just the other day, Taron Harris, their number one quarterback, again, he shares reps kind of with Driscoll here and there, but their number one quarterback has some sexual assault allegations from early Sunday morning, which would have been after his game last week. So Jeff Driscoll will start, which is their backup. The thing about it is the girl that was involved just said now there was 2 men and one of the other guy was in the football team. So who knows what's going on with that. But Taron Harris definitely will not play this Saturday. So if you have him on your team, I would take him off and pick somebody else up. Then, while all of this is happening, another quarterback, Skylar Morningwig, and their defensive tackle, Jared Willis, got into a scuffle. This is the most unbelievable scuffle in the world, too. They had their shoes on a drying station, and Jared Willis couldn't find his shoes up there, so he grabbed the number 17 shoes, which he thought were his other defensive tackle buddies' shoes, to give to him. Well, Skylar Morningwig was having none of that because those were actually his shoes. Apparently, he just recently switched numbers from 17 to 8. So he walked up to him and he was asking about it. Eventually got into some punches thrown. And, I mean, who's going to win that? Not Skylar Morningwig as a quarterback, a defensive tackle. Skylar Morningwig actually went to the hospital.
Yeah, that's bad. That's not what you want to see as a coach.
Had some lacerations to his bottom lip. Nothing serious. He was back at practice today. Him and another quarterback were kind of working out to see who's going to be the number 2 behind Jeff Driscoll. So just kind of a scuffle there. Morningwig did put some small cuts on Gerald Willis' chin, though, so he put up a fight.
Those cuts are irrelevant. What matters is the team camaraderie there.
Yeah,
that's what
good.
matters. It's not good, and that's going to
over something that small, especially just after all this stuff happened. You want to be helping out your backup quarterbacks as much as possible, not trying to get in scuffles with them. And it might have been Skylar Morningwig's fault in the first place, but who knows? On some brighter note, though, I don't know if you watched it. I don't know if anybody in here watched it, but the Ole Miss fans, after they beat Alabama, it was a Riley Stadium, by the way. It was game day was there. It was huge. They had the biggest crowd for game day ever. They stormed the field, and quite a few things happened. First, they stormed the field, which is against NCAA violations. They got fined for that, which was $50,000 was their max offense because it was the third time they've done it. They've already been warned before. But they took down the goalpost, which is a normal thing to do when you storm the field. But one group of, and by the way, they stole both goalposts. One of the goalposts was found just outside the stadium. And then another pole, you can watch a video online of them like walking through the streets with it. And I mean, and the thing about it is everybody was doing it safely. The police were watching it all the time. They didn't care. But they still can't find that other piece of goalpost. But a cool thing here is their athletic director, Ross Broerk, said, it was great that our fans had such a great time. It was such a great game. Everybody was awesome. The 12th man definitely helped our team win. But he asked the crowd through a crowdfunding platform, the fans that were there, to pay back for all the damages. So the 2 goalposts that go down, each of them costs $11,000. That's $22,000 right there. Then the fine for the $50,000 for all the fans running on the field, and then $3,000 for some stadium repairs, which apparently happened. But he said it was all worth it. All that money's worth it. They said it was such a great game. But here's the thing: you have the option to send a donation in, anything from as little as $5, which will get you a thank you note signed by Bjork himself, or just thank you note from him, saying, hey, thanks for being such a great fan. You can do $500 and you get a 3-inch piece of the goalpost that was tore down, or you can pay $1,000 and get 6-inch piece of the goalpost that got knocked down. Kind of a cool little way to do it there.
That's smart. That's thinking.
They've sold all 70 of the 3-inch pieces and 10 of the 6-inch pieces immediately. They've raised $92,433 over the amount, which was the total $75,000 for all the fines. Said the extra money is going to go towards Chucky Mullins scholarship, which Chucky Mullins was an old player for Ole Miss. They all slap his head on the way out. But wow, what a unique way to do that. 760 donations as of 8:00 Wednesday.
That's quite impressive, and the sad thing, though, is it's going to get some other people, some schools that are just thinking about the money and what's going to happen there. They're going to kind of endorse such behavior, possibly. No? Yeah. You don't think so?
They're definitely going to, I'm sure they're going to try to get people to be safer. But what Bjork said is we were all going to pay this no matter what. And it was worth it. That wasn't all about the money. It was about the connection and the cause, trapped in the emotion of the big win.
Yeah. Well, what I see is the NCAA upping that fine for storming the field. That's one thing I see because
could be
something like this happens.
If it happens, it's maximum of $5,000 for rushing the field. It was the third time fans have done so, and so and I think it was like 4 years or 5 years is like the limit the NCAA puts. But yeah, I could see that possibly going up. But yeah we'll go about that. But just kind of a little fun fact. Another thing is there was a mock. Well, I'll let Kyle talk more about this, but there was a mock selection committee ranking today.
There was. What they did is it was the media that did it. They went in. They pretended like they were going to be the playoff selection committee. They went back to the 2008 season because obviously we don't have enough information for this season. And they went through all the steps that the playoff committee is going to go through, and they picked who should have been in the top 4 spots for the playoff that year had it been played, and then obviously they picked the rest of the 25 going down. Now, if you remember right, in 2008, Oklahoma and Florida, both 12-1, played for the BCS title. Back then, obviously, that whoever won that game was the champion. Now it's not going to be the case. There's going to be 2 games, semifinal games, playing for that one game, and then whoever wins that one game is obviously the champion. That year, there were 5 other one-loss major conference teams and 2 non-major unbeatens.
Utah and Boise State.
You got it. And you have any inclination of why they would have picked this year to do their mock draft?
Because it's going to look a lot. It's going to be similar. It's a lot just like it. There's a lot of one-loss teams. I can see a lot of one-loss teams going all the way to the end of the season, and there might be 1 or 2 middle-of-the-pack, undefeated teams.
That's definitely one reason. I'll get to another reason a little later, but we kind of want to go through the process so everyone understands. The committee started with a vote of the top 25 teams, exact same as the AP poll. Every team listed on at least 3 of those ballots out of the 13 people goes into the consideration pool. And if you can see me right now, I'm doing air quotes. Consideration pool. 34 teams actually ended up in the pool for this one. The committee then votes on 6 teams it wants to consider for the top 3 spots. Once they vote on those teams, they go through, they do the vote, which 3 of the 6 deserve to be in there, and then they go back through and do it all over again to find that 4th team. It's really a whole lot of hoopla, if you ask me, really. If you watch college football, you should already know. Everybody's going to have a different opinion about it, but you should already know those top 4 teams. Like we do every week. We don't sit through a bunch of conference meetings and figure out blah, 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 blah. No, we know because we're watching the games. We know who those top 4 teams are, but that's the way they're going to do it. One gripe I have with this 2008 season, I'm a Texas fan. You know that. Mm-hmm. This is the year that Texas was snubbed from the BCS.
I remember that year. It was when they played Oklahoma.
Yep, that year. Oklahoma lost to Texas. Oklahoma ended up in the championship. That really gets me going. That's why they did this. They want all those fans that are like, oh, Texas should have been in there. Texas should have been in there. And I think that's one of the reasons they picked 2008 to prove that, oh, this playoff selection committee would have had Texas in there. Because it actually came through in the mock. I'll tell you all the teams. Florida, USC, Oklahoma, and then Texas was the 4th team that was put in there. So they kind of want to say, hey, yeah, we would have had Texas in there, which everybody that watched all the games that season knows Texas deserved to be in that national championship. They're kind of doing a little endorsement, I think, for the playoff selection committee. But the problem I have with that is the BCS did not keep Texas out of the BCS championship. The Big 12 conference, if you remember, kept Texas out of the BCS championship.
Mm-hmm.
It let Oklahoma into the Big 12 championship against Missouri that year because they were ranked higher in the AP polls, which should have never happened. Texas was ranked higher in the BCS, but obviously the Big 12 makes their own. They have their own rules for who goes to the Big 12 championship. From there, Oklahoma obviously beat Missouri, who Texas or Oklahoma, nobody would argue about that, was going to beat Missouri anyways. And then they got propelled above Texas in the BCS, and they ended up in the BCS championship.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
It makes me so mad. It had nothing to do with the BCS, so I don't know why these playoff selection committee people are pretending like it did. They're just trying to promote themselves. They're trying to say, oh, this is so good. But after us talking about the past few weeks, I hope people understand all this playoff selection committee is limiting that AP poll down to 13 people. So rather than having a huge majority now, you just have 13 people that are going to decide it all with, obviously everybody has their own opinion and their own preferences. So
yeah. As far as kind of our picks, what are your picks this week?
Well, I'm not going to agree with them at all. Whatever they say, I can tell you that much. I don't know what they're going to say yet, but I'm going to disagree no matter what they say. We're both going to be changing up our picks this week.
We have to. I mean,
there's no question about that. The one team I'm still going to have in there, and I don't even think they deserve to be in there, but I'm going to keep them in there, is Florida State, because they haven't lost. They're champions last year. You can't really take them out. It's hard to take them out.
Not yet, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The second they lose, they're out of there for me. I'm going to put Ole Miss and Mississippi State in there right now. They're both good teams, solid teams.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then I'm going to take Georgia out of here, and I've had Georgia in there for a while. They lost, still had them in there, and I wasn't really true to the form because it's supposed to be if it was played today. I still do believe coming into the season they might be in there. This Gurley thing kind of hurts, but I'm going to take them out. I'm going to play true to our pick it now. If it were to be played now, I'm going to put Notre Dame in there.
Okay. I'm going to agree with you.
Notre Dame?
I'm going to put Notre Dame in too. Notre Dame's in mine. Mississippi State's in mine and Florida State's in mine.
So we're three.
Pretty close there. Here's my big thing: Auburn.
Auburn.
I'm not going to say this is right now. Those are the teams I think should be in there. Auburn is playing Mississippi State this weekend, which is going to be the premier game. But that, as far as it goes right now, that's what I have in there. So before we head out, I want to say give my regards to the family of the original Hook 'em Horns creator. Was a former cheerleader at Texas and a state judge. Died at 78 on Wednesday. That's a big loss to the Texas fan base, especially after a year as they're having now. But the Hook 'em Horn sign, I think if anybody were to do that around the United States, they'd know exactly what that's from. So it's kind of an iconic symbol. But I'm Woj.
I'm Wall.
And thanks for listening.